What is up, everybody? My name is Jeffrey Gardner. Welcome back once again to another episode of Upset Alert. It is episode number 88. Hard to believe we are that far along, but 88 of the Ultimate College Football Podcast, celebrating all 130 teams in FBS. We are here today coming at you on a Monday afternoon for our normal wrap-up episode, kind of wrapping up the weekend that was in college football. We're here Monday at about 1:30 p.m. Eastern time, just to give you context in case any more of these games continue to get postponed later on in the day. I didn't know, but there certainly have been a few already to get postponed for this coming weekend in college football. We might get a little bit into that today. But mostly, like I said, today's episode, as usual, on a Monday, we're kind of just going to go through all the games from the past weekend, get those results down and out of the way, and we do have a little bit of news, college football-related news, that is, to discuss on today's episode, rather. Some head coaching changes coming at South Carolina, for example. We'll get into all that in just a bit, but for now, let's get a little bit of housekeeping out of the way. First and foremost, for those of you joining us for the first time, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us here, whether you are live on twitch.tv/robotbraineater. That is where we stream live on video twice a week, normally every Monday and Thursday. Sometimes schedules might change a little bit. We've pushed to Tuesday for that first episode of the week before we push to Friday for the second episode. But we like to try to aim for Monday and Thursday, recording sometime in the afternoon, normally a little later than we are today. So coming at you guys a little bit earlier than we normally do on a Monday. But nonetheless, thanks for joining us on twitch.tv/robotbraineater. If you want to watch us live on video, that's the way to do that. The videos do stay on Twitch on demand after that, and then they do also upload to YouTube after that as well. Later on in the same day, every Monday and Thursday, we're up on podcast services around the world: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, Google, etc. So whatever your podcast service of choice is, you can find us on there. Check us out on there if you so choose. Upset Alert, again, is the name of the podcast. We're at Upset Alert Pod on Twitter as well. You'll probably hear me shout that one out a few times throughout the show, as we just refer to information that we kind of filter through that Twitter account. That's where we do most of our social media-ing for the podcast. So however you're joining us today, thanks so much for joining us here on a Monday or whenever you may be listening to it later on. And let's get right into it here. As I was mentioning, a little bit of news before we get into the kind of going through all the results for the week's games. We do have a little bit of news. Coach Will Muschamp is out at South Carolina. His firing coming yesterday, I suppose it was yesterday, late in the afternoon, early evening, following a loss Saturday against Ole Miss on the road. So kind of crazy stuff when you think about it. Just a weird year. So we didn't know if it was going to be like a normal year in terms of with the lack of revenue coming in from fans not attending, at least the bulk of fans not being able to attend home games. Would these schools have enough money in their budget to pay these kind of buyouts that you have to pay on a head coaching contract in college football, which can be very, very expensive, as we all know? Apparently so. They've still got the money. That's not an issue. So South Carolina said we can no longer continue with Will Muschamp as the head coach. So the Will Muschamp's experiment has now evidently failed at Florida and then at South Carolina later on as well. So you got to send some love to Will Muschamp today, but don't feel too bad for him. He's still getting money from Florida, I believe, and he's going to be getting money from South Carolina for years to come as well, on top of whatever his new job is, whether he goes on to become a defensive coordinator somewhere, maybe a head coach at a smaller school, whatever that position may be. We'll wait and see on that, obviously. But let's get into these results a little bit here. So let's check some of this out. We did get into the early week results a little bit on Thursday's episode, kind of the early weekday games. They're mostly MAC matchups, but we'll review those real quick for you just in case you didn't get a chance to listen Thursday. Tuesday, November the 10th, we had Ohio win 24-10 over Akron. Kent State won 62-24 over Bowling Green. We had Buffalo winning 42-10 over Miami, Ohio. Wednesday, we had Ball State winning 38-31 over Eastern Michigan, 41-38 win for Western Michigan over Toledo, and Central Michigan winning 40-10 over Northern Illinois. Now, the rest of the games we did not get a chance to discuss yet since these are Thursday and beyond. So Thursday night, we did have Boise State hosting Colorado State. Boise State wins that one 52-21. No huge surprise in that one. Friday night, we had a handful of games. So Florida Atlantic on the road wins 38-19 against FIU. Nothing really shocking there, I don't think. Iowa wins 35-7 over Minnesota on the road. Decent win for Iowa. Both of these teams really needed a win in this one, so good for the Hawkeyes. They get a pretty good looking win on the road there. And then East Carolina was on the road against number 7 Cincinnati. Cincinnati, of course, beat them like you would expect, 55-17 for the Bearcats in that one. So we move on to Saturday's games, and I will tell you as we get into the bulk of these games here, this is kind of going to be a little bit of a from the hip style episode. I'm not sure if honestly we'll have enough discussion to fill our normal episode time, which is about 40-45 minutes, somewhere in that time range, sometimes a little longer, sometimes a little shorter. Today, like Monday's like last Thursday's episode, might be a little bit on the shorter side of that, just because, quite frankly, this past weekend in college football, there was not a single ranked matchup. There were not a lot of big matchups, and a lot of games got canceled as well, canceled or postponed. And so we're going to kind of have to stretch a few of these discussions maybe a little bit if we're going to fill that time. And I'd rather not waste you guys' time with fluff. So we're pretty much just going to do our normal thing. And if we finish a little earlier, then we finish a little earlier, and it is what it is. So let's get into these here. We did have a couple of good games, I will say, on Saturday, some of which I didn't expect to be good. That's always kind of a pleasant surprise when you get some that you don't necessarily expect to be interesting that turn out to be better than maybe you expected. So we had number 9 Miami on the road against Virginia Tech, and that was an early game on Saturday and actually turned out to be a really good one. Miami, who has been legit all season long, pretty much has been in that top 15. Obviously, now you see in the top 10 status right there. This is a really good Miami football team. They go on the road here against a good Virginia Tech team. Virginia Tech gave them all they could handle, and Miami did not give in. De'Aaron King with a big drive late in this game, leading his team down the field. They win it by a point. Miami wins 25-24. I was impressed by this win, to be quite frank. This is the type of game that teams like Miami, the way they've been playing this year, have been vulnerable to, right? This is the type of game that you see good teams lose sometimes, and Miami really started to separate themselves from that good tier of teams into that great tier of teams, if not quite the elite of the elite. They are still a very, very good / great team, and going on the road and winning against a good Virginia Tech team when Virginia Tech really gave them all they could handle in this one. I think that says a lot about Miami's character as a team, shows they're built different than this year than they have been in the past few seasons when they were deemed to be a competitive team, we'll say. We had number 10, Indiana, very good football team. Speaking of great teams, Indiana is still undefeated. They were on the road against Michigan State, who has not been particularly great. Indiana wins that one 24-0. That's about what you expect. This is building to a big matchup, big matchup coming this weekend between Indiana and Ohio State. Obviously, Indiana not expected to win that game, but I think you give Indiana a little more credit than what they're getting right now. I believe early lines have Indiana as a 20.5-point underdog to Ohio State. Based on the way Indiana has played so far, you got to give them a little credit and think they're going to keep it a little bit closer than that. And we've got Sippy Show joining in the chat here on Twitch, live on Twitch. So Sippy Show, how is it going? Says my guy, what's up? Finally able to join in. Glad you could make it. Glad you could make it today. We were just saying not a ton of excitement from the last weekend in college football, so it might be a little bit of a shorter one, but we're getting into the results here. We had number 16 Marshall beat Middle Tennessee today, or on Saturday rather. Marshall wins that one comfortably, 42-14. Not much to talk about there. Number 22 Liberty wins 58-14 over a bad, of course, FCS. Unfair comparison there. Western Carolina team. Liberty continues their winning ways. Their offense continues to be unreal. We've got Tulane, who actually, this one surprised me, I have to admit. Army went on the road against Tulane. Tulane wins this one 38-12. I really expected Army to win this football game. Army doesn't give up this many points very frequently just because their offense tends to kind of control the time of possession for the Black Knights for the most part, tends to limit the possessions for the opposing offense. That was not the case on Saturday. Tulane really looked good in this one offensively and just in shutting down that Army triple option offense. So good on Tulane. They moved to 5-4 on the year. That's a pretty good win for them. Here comes one where I'm going to have a little bit of a take on it, I suppose. We had Penn State on the road against Nebraska. Nebraska wins this one by a touchdown, 30-23, the final score in this one. I said on Twitter, over on our Twitter account at Upset Alert Pod, that Penn State, I'm not going to go easy on you on this episode here. Penn State has had a rough go of it. I hate to just be the guy that piles on, but I have been predicting, hoping that this Penn State team would bounce back. They had a tough loss week 1. I understand that. That was a back-breaking type of loss against Indiana in overtime. I understand that even, but or I guess just before overtime. But I thought this team was better than what they are. I really thought this Penn State team would at least be competitive against Ohio State. They weren't really. I thought that they would maybe bounce back with a win last week. They didn't. And then this week against Nebraska, I certainly thought they were going to bounce back with a win against Nebraska, having started 0-3. Again, didn't happen. Penn State, let's call it like it is. This team is not someone that before... I really thought this Penn State team was just, they had their spirit broken against Indiana and they can't get motivated and that kind of thing. That may be part of the case, but this team has some serious deficiencies. Penn State is awful. You have to call it like it is right now. Not only are they not a top 10 team like they were in the preseason, they are not in the top 50% of all of college football right now. They might not even be in the top 80 or 90 teams in college football right now based on the way they're playing. This team looks awful, quite frankly. I don't know how many games this Penn State team realistically can expect to win right now with the way they're playing. They just don't look ready to play football out there. It's hard to explain when this is a team that I legitimately had in my top 5 in the preseason. But they just have looked so bad, so bad. Nebraska is not a particularly great team, and they were definitely the better team on Saturday. It's not looking good for the Nittany Lions going forward. I don't know how much hope you have to get more than a couple of wins this season at this point. I know they are going to probably take a long, hard look at that contract that they have in place for James Franklin as the head coach up there at Penn State. I know Penn State Twitter is already erupting, saying they are ready for him to go. We've got, we'll move on from that on that bitter note, perhaps. We've got Wake Forest at North Carolina. This one was a shootout. I guess this type of game has maybe migrated from the Big 12 to the ACC a little bit this season, at least for some of these teams. So Wake Forest and North Carolina put up over 100 points between the two of them. It was 59-53 for the Tar Heels on Saturday. North Carolina's offense is the real deal. They don't have much of a defense. They're definitely an incomplete team. I really thought for a while they were going to lose this game, actually. I thought Wake Forest was going to win this one. They led at multiple points in the game. But Tar Heels, give credit where credit's due. They pull out the win and get a pretty decent one, I would say, over a decent Wake Forest team, even if it was close and even if they still have some definite question marks on the defensive side of the ball for the Tar Heels. We had TCU on the road against West Virginia. West Virginia won this one 24-6. West Virginia, I kind of flipped my script on them a week or two ago. I just realized this team was doing better than I expected them to, and they continue to do that a little bit. TCU, despite that big Texas win early on in the season, hasn't really done much since then. They sit at 3-4. West Virginia, by comparison, sits at 5-3 now. So good win for the Mountaineers. They're kind of separating themselves a little bit from the pack, or at least the bottom of the Big 12. We had Vanderbilt at Kentucky. Kentucky wins this one 38-35. Never did I think I would see Vanderbilt's offense score this many points on a decent Kentucky defense, but that was the case. Kentucky's offense, not too shabby. Their defense normally is a lot tighter than they showed in this game, but the Wildcats do still get a close win. I don't know how excited you can get about a field goal win over a team as bad as Vanderbilt, but nonetheless, Kentucky 3-4 sounds a lot better than Vandy's 0-6 that they are sitting at right now. Vandy still remains the team to beat for worst team in the SEC for sure. Illinois on the road won 23-20 against Rutgers. Rutgers was favored in this game, so a little bit of an upset. Neither of these teams obviously particularly great. Rutgers has outperformed a little bit. Maybe Illinois had underperformed a little bit to this point in the season, but you do like the Illini going on the road and picking up their first win. They move to 1-3, as does Rutgers. We had South Alabama on the road against number 25 Louisiana. The Raging Cajuns win this one 38-10. Not really much to talk about there. Raging Cajuns do about what you expect against a bad South Alabama team. We had App State play a close one, actually, a bit of an ugly win, 17-13 over the Georgia State Panthers. App State has really had some unsexy wins, some ugly wins over the course of this season, but they still are undefeated in the Sun Belt. They still have only one loss on the season. They're 6-1, and they are coming into their biggest game of the season next week against Coastal Carolina. That will be the game that decides who goes to the Sun Belt Conference Championship game to play Louisiana, who, by the way, did just clinch with that win over South Alabama. They did just clinch once again that Western Division in the Sun Belt. So Raging Cajuns have punched their ticket to the SBC Championship game. We had Fresno State on the road at Utah State. Fresno State wins 35-16. Not a ton to say there. Fresno State off to a decent start, I suppose. 3-1. Utah State, rough start. They are winless through their first 4 games. We had UTEP at UTSA. UTSA wins this one more comfortably than I thought they would, to be quite frank. UTEP has been a bit of a pesky team for some folks at times. UTSA has been a little bit more than that, you would say. They win 52-21. Nice offensive showing for the Roadrunners in that one. We had another big top-ranked team on the road against an unranked team, and Notre Dame really passed the test, I thought, in this one. It would be very easy. It would be very easy after that big Clemson game for Notre Dame to start looking ahead to their rematch with Clemson. That's probably happening down the road in the ACC championship game. They could really just slip up against one of these quality opponents that fall along the way. Boston College is a quality opponent, but Notre Dame did not slip up. They allowed some points to a good Boston College team, but they win this one by a couple touchdowns. It was 45-31. I thought Notre Dame looked good out there. Their offense continues to be really great. Ian Book is a good quarterback. They've got one of the best offensive lines in the country, maybe the best offensive line in the country, and they were out there making plays. So you got to like Notre Dame, honestly, the way they are looking right now. I know it's popular to hate on Notre Dame. I know they get overhyped a lot. But this year, I got to say, Notre Dame does look pretty darn good. And friendly reminder, they don't need to beat Clemson in the ACC championship game to make the playoff. They could still make the playoff after losing that game. We will see. We will see how things go. We have number 20 USC on the road against Arizona. This was one of the more exciting finishes of the weekend. USC narrowly avoided an upset in this one, and Arizona is not a great team. They were playing very hard out there, though. They were outplaying USC for almost the entire game. Arizona took a late lead in this one, about a minute and a half left in the game. They scored a go-ahead touchdown. USC drives right down the field in just over a minute, scores a touchdown of their own, takes a 34-30 lead, and holds on to beat the Wildcats. The Trojans survive. Again, they've had two very close wins to start off their season here, but they are 2-0. Nonetheless, I don't know what the level of confidence in them as a Pac-12 championship pick, which is what I did for USC, is pick them to win the Pac-12. I don't know what my level of confidence is in that pick at this point, but they are 2-0, so it's certainly possible. Nobody's going to argue that. The schedule lines up nicely for them still, but they have not looked particularly great in two wins that they've kind of stumbled for through their first 2 weeks here. We had Western Kentucky hosting Southern Miss. I know Sippy Show in the chat on Twitch is excited to hear some Southern Miss talk here. Western Kentucky did pick up the win in this one. Western Kentucky wins at 10-7. This was really a game that, like I said, coming into it this week, I think both teams really, really wanted this win. Neither team has had a great season to this point. Western Kentucky moves to 3-6 with the win. Southern Miss falls to 2-6. It's just an issue ongoing for Southern Miss. Really, it seems that they don't have options at quarterback at the moment. I know they've had some injury issues and things like that, but 6 for 14 for 67 yards, no touchdowns is just not going to get it done in terms of quarterback play. The rushing attack, a little bit of a brighter spot, I guess, about 150 yards on the ground in that one for the Golden Eagles. But by comparison, you look at Western Kentucky passing 19 of 30 for 183 yards. It's not sexy numbers on either side, but Southern Miss, you just got to do a little bit more on offense than that. 7 points is not going to get it done. Western Kentucky has not been great this year, but they do pick up the win at home, and Southern Miss's troubles continue. We had South Florida on the road against Houston. Houston wins this one big, 56-21. The Cougs are good. The Cougs are pretty good. South Florida, not so much. Houston, I guess, not so good. They're only at 3-3 for the year, but South Florida, just one win on the season. They're at 1-7 following this loss. Houston, kind of in the middle of the pack in the conference, you have to say. South Florida, one of the worst in the AAC this year. We had Georgia Southern, who is very quietly stringing together wins. They're 6-2 now. Hosted Texas State. Texas State falls to 1-9 with a close loss here. Georgia Southern, not a sexy win. Again, they've had a few like this season. Unsexy wins, ugly wins. But they win 40-38 over the Bobcats, and they move to that 6-2 mark. Georgia Southern is a team that quietly is still alive in that Sun Belt Conference championship race. If you do look at where the losses have come for them, though, they have lost already to Louisiana and to Coastal Carolina. So it's a very outside shot that they have at that Eastern Division in the Sun Belt. But they are still technically alive. At the very least, this is a team, though, that could play spoiler to someone like App State down the road. We had Louisville at Virginia. Virginia wins this one 31-17. Two teams that have some ugly records in the ACC this year. Virginia gets the best of the Cardinals. Louisville just can't seem to get it together this year. They fall to 2-6. Moving along, we had Colorado at Stanford in the Pac-12. Two teams that are interesting for completely different reasons to me. Stanford, because the expectations just used to be so much higher at Stanford for this football program. This used to be a perennial Northern Division contender in the Pac-12. If they didn't make that conference championship game, it was a disappointing year. And now all of a sudden we're talking 0-2, including a loss to Colorado, and that's not so bad. Colorado is 2-0 to start off the year, something I definitely did not expect. If you have been listening to the show for a while, you know in the preseason I picked them to be the worst team in the Pac-12. So them and Oregon State kind of right on the same tier. And that doesn't look like a great pick to this point in the season, as they've already beat UCLA and Stanford. This one a close one, 35-32 for Colorado. We had San Diego State hosting Hawaii, a little Mountain West action. San Diego State, the Aztecs win 34-10. Hawaii underperforming, I would say, to this point in the season. They're just 2-2. A team that I would think on paper is one of the better teams in the Mountain West Conference still, but they have not played to that expectation lately. Texas Tech hosted Baylor, won a close one, 24-23. Baylor is just having a nightmare year after such a magical year last year. They are only 1-5 to this point in 2020. We had number 23 Northwestern on the road against a team that has outplayed expectations as well. Both of these teams really have. Purdue was 2-0 coming into this one. Northwestern, ranked on the road, was 3-0 coming into this one. Northwestern moves to 4-0. Something had to give. A good game, though, 27-20 for the Wildcats on the road. Got to give some love to Northwestern at 4-0. Who saw that coming? I don't think anyone. We have Nevada on the road against New Mexico. Nevada won 27-20 over a very bad New Mexico team, so a bit of an ugly win, but nonetheless, Nevada does continue their winning ways as well. They moved to 4-0. We had number 6 Florida hosting Arkansas. I gave you the warning in the preview episode from last Thursday's episode, that Florida might be in for a bit of a trap game in this one. Maybe watch out Arkansas for a potential upset, or at least keeping the game closer than it should be. I hope you didn't listen to me, because that was not the case at all. Florida does give up some points in this game. Their defense is not particularly great in most games this year. So they allowed 35 to the Hogs, but Florida just offensively puts on a clinic. 63 points for the Gators, and I have a lot of takes here on the Florida Gators. You guys know it, when I say this, you have to take this one seriously, because I tell you all the time on here, I'm a Georgia Bulldog, right? I graduated from the University of Georgia. I don't pretend to be anything other than a diehard Georgia Bulldog fan in my heart, deep in my heart of hearts, you could say. So when I say something good about Florida, it probably means something. So I'm going to say a couple of things, a couple of really positive things about Florida. First and foremost, if the season were to end today and I were a Heisman Trophy voter, Kyle Trask would be my Heisman Trophy winner. Now, unfortunately, that's not the case for Florida because they're still going to have to, while the rest of the regular season schedule may not be particularly crazy, challenging or anything like that for the most part, this is a team that's going to have to play probably Alabama in the SEC championship game. And that is not going to be a friendly defense, even if they're not as nasty as they have been at times in the past. This is going to be a team that is going to give you some issues offensively that you don't have against teams like Arkansas. Kyle Trask, however, 23 of 29 in this game, 356 passing yards, 6 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. He averaged 12.3 yards per attempt in this game. He had 5 of those passing touchdowns, by the way, in the first half. They took their foot off the gas pedal in the second half, thankfully, before somebody called the mercy rule on Arkansas. But this guy is just unreal, and he put up all those crazy numbers in that game, by the way, without Kyle Pitts, who is the best tight end in college football and the best receiver on the Florida Gators. That dude is just a monster, and without him out there, Kyle Trask puts up those kind of monster numbers. He is just untouchable this year. And so that leads me to my second, maybe spicy take on the Florida Gators right here. And that is this. As a Georgia fan, I've watched Georgia play Alabama, and I've watched Georgia play Florida, right? Florida played better against Georgia than Alabama did. That doesn't necessarily mean Florida is a better team than Alabama is. I don't know if that's the case, but I am officially saying I think this Florida team is capable of beating Alabama. I did not believe that at any point this season until after this week. I think this Florida team is capable of beating the Alabama Crimson Tide, and Kyle Trask and Kyle Pitts are going to be a big, big part of that. Now, Florida's defense has got to play better than they did against Arkansas. They got to play more like they did against Georgia. Otherwise, Alabama's receivers are going to have a field day, and I don't know if you can win if you let Alabama score the way that Alabama likes to score with their big, explosive wide receivers. But this is a legit Florida Gators team, the best one that we have seen in probably a decade. So take that for what it is. Like I said, from a Georgia fan, that is what I see in the Florida Gators right now. Moving on, we've got number 11 Oregon on the road at Washington State. Oregon won this one 43-29. Was a little closer for a while. Washington State started out kind of hot in this game, but Oregon pulls away toward the end. You got to like the Ducks starting the season right where you thought they'd be, undefeated. We did have an upset on here, number 19 SMU, and I guess technically it wasn't an upset. Tulsa was favored in this game by 2.5 points for most of the week. I think the line eventually moved to SMU minus 1.5 or so, but number 19 SMU lost on the road against a good Tulsa team who hasn't played a ton of games. They've had several games get postponed or canceled, but Tulsa moves to 4-1, and they jump into our top 25 over on our Twitter account at Upset Alert Pod. You can check out our rankings for all 127 teams in college football this fall. So good on Tulsa. The Golden Hurricane, one of the craziest mascots that makes absolutely no sense to me, especially being out in Oklahoma. I've never heard of a hurricane appearing in the middle of a dry country rather than on the coast, I suppose. But, that's neither here nor there. Tulsa with a good win. They move into the top 25 for us. SMU drops out of it. So good win for Tulsa. We had number 13, Wisconsin, on the road against Michigan. Here comes another spicy Big Ten take, and this really isn't spicy, to be quite frank. This is maybe just piling on at this point after everyone was doing this during this game. Wisconsin, 49-11 on the road against Michigan. Wisconsin looks really good from what little we have seen of them thus far. They were finally back in action this week, so just their second game of the season. But you have to call it like it is. Michigan looks terrible. They have not played well at all this season. They fall to 1-3, and Jim Harbaugh just might not be it. It might be time to look yourself in the mirror and admit that, Michigan fans. Jim Harbaugh might not be the guy for you at head coach. I know people have said, if not him, then who? I don't have the answer to that, but I don't think Jim Harbaugh is the guy for Michigan. I don't think Michigan is going anywhere in the right direction, that is. It seems to get a little worse over the last couple of years, and this year is just not Michigan-level football, even by the standard set of the last 3 or 4 years. We had Temple at UCF. UCF, again, kind of quietly piling up the wins. They win 38-13. They are 5-2 on the season, so not as crazy of a year as they had back in 2017 when, of course, they went undefeated and were the unofficial national champions. But UCF, pretty darn good football team, and they got a big game coming up, by the way, this coming weekend with Cincinnati. So another kind of blockbuster matchup that will ultimately determine if they stay alive in the conference championship race or not in that AAC. We had NC State hosting Florida State. NC State wins this one 38-22. Decent win for the Wolfpack. Florida State's been pretty bad for most of the season outside of that big top 5 win over North Carolina at the time. But you got to give some love to the Wolfpack. They continue to be pretty good this year. They moved to 5-3. We had Ole Miss win against South Carolina. I referenced this a little earlier in the episode. In light of the Will Muschamp firing at South Carolina, Ole Miss did win this game by 17, so 59-42. If you haven't seen it, there was a highlight, a long Ole Miss touchdown play where Lane Kiffin throws a clipboard straight up into the air, spirals probably a good 40 or 50 feet straight up, and then chases the receiver down the sideline the whole way to celebrate the touchdown. It was a pretty great Lane Kiffin moment for those of you who are big Lane Kiffin fans. It's a must-watch. UNLV on the road at San Jose State. San Jose State won that one 34-17. Another team quietly piling wins. San Jose State is 4-0 to start the season. I definitely did not have them that hot of a start to the season. And then Washington hosting Oregon State. Washington wins this one 27-21. Again, a lot of games this past week did get postponed or canceled, so we will see going forward how they handle the scheduling or rescheduling of some of those games. But we will get into real quick the early week predictions, the early game predictions for this week. So we have some games tomorrow night, Tuesday night. Buffalo at Bowling Green kicking us off with some action, 7 p.m. on CBS Sports Network. I've got Buffalo winning this one. No big surprise there. Buffalo is a 31.5-point favorite. They should certainly win on the road there. Akron at Kent State. Kent State, again, a heavy favorite, 24-point favorite over the Akron Zips, who are one of the worst teams in college football. You got to like Kent State, 8 p.m. ESPN Tuesday night for that one. Ohio and Miami. Ohio has been canceled, not postponed, but outright canceled. Disappointing one there because that actually is an interesting game between two 1-1 teams. We had Northern Illinois at Ball State, 7 p.m. ESPN News. I like Ball State in this one. They're a 2-touchdown favorite. I feel pretty good about that number. 7 p.m. CBS Sports Network. We're moving on to Wednesday, by the way, now. Toledo at Eastern Michigan. I do like Toledo on the road here. They're a 6.5-point favorite. I thought Toledo actually would beat Western Michigan this past week. They did not, but I like Toledo on the road here. Western Michigan at Central Michigan. This is the game of the night on Wednesday night, 7 p.m. ESPN2. Central Michigan, a 2-point favorite at home. I do like Central Michigan at home here. It is going to be close, I think. I like that 2-point margin. I think these are both good teams. Central Michigan, if I had to pick, I think will cover that 2-point margin in this football game. The Chippewas went to the MAC championship last year. They're a pretty good football team again this year, it looks like. Western Michigan may be outperforming my expectations a little already this year. And then we'll get into these Thursday predictions real quick, since Thursday's episode probably will post around the time the first of these kicks off. So Thursday night, 7:30 ESPN, Tulane at number 25, Tulsa. I like Tulsa. They're favored by 6 in this one. Tulane showed me something against Army this past week, but Tulsa has the overall better body of work. I think they go 5-1 with the win over Tulane. And 9 p.m. CBS Sports Network Thursday night, Utah State at Wyoming. Wyoming's a 20-point favorite in that one. I like the Cowboys comfortable in that one. Give me Wyoming. That's about going to wrap us up for episode number 88 of Upset Alert. Thank you guys once again so much for listening. Again, we are on twitch.tv/robotbraineater, streaming live on video every Monday and Thursday afternoon. We are on Twitter at Upset Alert Pod if you want to follow us on there to get all the college football news of the world, as well as find out when we are going live on Twitch, when we're posting episodes. We are on podcast services, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, Google, everything you can imagine pretty much. So subscribe, follow us on your podcast service of choice. And if you do want to take the time to leave us that 5-star review on there, helps us out greatly as well to get more eyeballs and more ears on the podcast. Thank you guys again so much for listening and for tuning in live on video as well. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And until Thursday, we will see you later.